Okay, in this episode of Shadow Reviews, I'm going to be reviewing the Batman Beyond episode, King's Ransom. The episode begins with the Royal Flush Gang having broken into a local museum in Neo-Gotham to steal an item for Paxton Powers. And the Royal Flush Gang is actually falling apart since 10 left and essentially got on the right track. But having accidentally triggered the security alarm, they had to steal the artifact quickly before Batman or the police arrive. But then Batman arrives immediately, landing right in front of the artifact that Paxton Powers hired them to steal. The Royal Flush Gang, being the idiots that they are, instead of running, actually try to fight Batman. And since this episode is titled King's Ransom, I'm pretty sure you can easily assume how well that's gonna go for them. So anyways, the artifact was actually damaged during the fight, as was Ace, the Royal Flush Gang's robotic member. So anyways, King actually grabbed the artifact in the fight, and the Royal Flush Gang quickly ran out as soon as possible and ran off to find Paxton as soon as possible. But unfortunately for them, Batman does not give up so easily, and using the futuristic tech in his suit, follows them into the air. Batman brings down Jack during the chase. Queen wants to go back and help Jack fight off Batman, but the police have already shown up, and Queen, King, and Ace are forced to leave Jack for the police while they meet up with Paxton Powers. Police Commissioner Barbara Gordon tries to get Jack to spill the beans on who they were working for, but she's essentially getting nothing out of him. I really gotta say, the use of card puns in this scene is genius. Stuff like Barbara telling Jack that his family discarded him, or how she put it, threw him in the discard pile, and how Jack tells her that if she thinks he's gonna crack, she's not playing with a full deck. Brilliant. This is just the brilliant writing I'd expect from the DCAU. So, the Royal Flush Gang meet up with Paxton Powers and his assistant to essentially sell him the artifact. But when Paxton notices that the artifact was damaged when they fought Batman, he pretty much refuses to pay, calling it damaged goods. King tries to negotiate with Paxton Powers, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and Paxton refuses, which causes King to become very hostile, which leads to a fight between King and Powers' assistant, who actually turns out to be quite the fighter. She beats down and humiliates King, showing just how much the Royal Flush Gang has fallen since losing 10, and now Jack. So anyways, Paxton then offers King 2 credits, which in real-world currency would amount to only $2, and tells him to take it or leave it. Later, at the Casino Palace, King ends up being forced to tell his wife that he accepted what Paxton gave, what he offered him, and she chews him out, saying that this would have never happened if her father was still king. But then King tells his wife that he has a new plan that will put them back on top, as he says. So sometime later, the Royal Flush Gang attack Paxton Powers on the roof of his penthouse, and this time he makes sure that Ace is the one to take down his assistant, or go up against her. And the Royal Flush Gang takes Paxton hostage. So anyways, Melanie is doing her job at the restaurant she works at when she sees a news report about the Royal Flush Gang and freaks out. And when she takes a moment to step outside, she is instantly met with Batman, who she then assures him that she had nothing to do with the art heists or the abduction of Paxton Powers, and asks him if he gave Terry McGinnis that note, which he tells her he did. So anyways, then the Royal Flush Gang threatened to kill Paxton Powers unless he can cough up $20 million, but then Paxton reveals that because of a lot of his money was tied up in investments, and he's been living off company perks and is therefore broke. And when it becomes apparent that they're not going to shake any money out of the CEO of Wayne Powers because the man is broke, they decide to do the next best thing. They call Bruce Wayne and tell him to cough up money, or Paxton will be biting the big one. Unfortunately for them, Bruce Wayne has been playing this game way longer than they have, and it's really awesome. Right before Bruce Wayne hangs up, he says to King, "I'm sorry, but it's against company policy to pay terrorists or kidnappers. Just ask Paxton, he wrote the policy." So when Terry then asks Bruce if he's really going to go through with it, Bruce assures him that this isn't over, and he knows that they're gonna call back. So as Queen and King are bickering, Paxton gets an idea brewing in his noggin. When King is about to decapitate Paxton, he instantly pleads for his life and offers them the Crown of Tikal, an artifact that's worth $40 million by our world standard. Knowing that this would be a very good way to get arrested, They ask Paxton how to get into his home without running into anyone. He suggests his assistant, but since Queen doesn't trust her, they instead call Bruce Wayne. So anyways, Bruce and Terry arrive in Paxton's home, and then Paxton basically proposes that the Royal Flush Gang kill Bruce Wayne. He would end up in a position of power and would essentially be able to pay the Royal Flush Gang a lot of money, and his secret would be safe. So anyways, here's a part of the episode that is really admirable, and it's not the only part. You see, this shows that Bruce Wayne, despite being in his, well, anywhere from at least 70s to 80s to possibly even 90s, is still the world's greatest detective. He knew that Paxton had this collection. He just didn't know where he was keeping it. Even though he spent most of the last 20 years inside his own home, rarely leaving, he knew that the son of the man who bought out his company had been obtaining foreign artifacts illegally, and was able to put together that all these artifacts that disappeared off screen were part of a collection. He knew who the collector was, but the only piece of the puzzle was where the criminal collector was keeping his collection of stolen trinkets. So anyways, they get the Crown of Tikal, and they head off to exchange it for Paxton's life. When Terry questions this, Bruce just tells him that it's still his hand, and he's sweetening the pot. Bruce Wayne essentially calls King and tells him that they're good to go. So when King gives Paxton the typical "congratulations, you get to live" lecture, Paxton kind of points out the fact that he's going to be headed to jail, because the minute this whole thing is said and done, Bruce Wayne is going to tell the DA all about Paxton's collection of stolen artifacts. Then Paxton basically proposes that the Royal Flush Gang kill Bruce Wayne. He would end up in a position of power and would essentially be able to pay the Royal Flush Gang a lot of money, and his secret would be safe. So anyways, Bruce Wayne then shows up with the Crown of Tikal, ready to make the exchange, complete with Batman in position. And when I say in position, he's got the cloaking device up and everything, like the Predator. And here Ace actually thought he could sneak up on Batman. Boy, did he ever think wrong. A fight begins while Bruce meets up with King and Queen. He hands over the Crown of Tikal, and then demands that they release Paxton. Paxton then quickly unties himself, revealing that this whole thing was a setup for the sole purpose of luring out Bruce Wayne and killing him. King attacks Bruce, but Bruce is able to dodge the sword beam, and he radios for Batman. But Terry was out cold for a second, giving King a second chance to attack Bruce, which sent him directly into this fountain. And when King goes to get the body, he only pulls out a wet coat. And this kind of shows how amazing Bruce Wayne is. He could actually still do the whole ninja disappearing trick even in his old age, as he then appears behind King and smacks him into the fountain with his cane. But before Bruce could get to his limo, King was able to jump on his flying card thing and intercept Bruce. But with the snap of his finger, Ace the Bat-Hound dives out of Bruce Wayne's limo and attacks King. The sword beam still fires, but Bruce is able to jump out of the way and dodge it. Ace the Bat-Hound continues to attack King. Then Queen tries, but Bruce hurls his cane directly at her, knocking her scepter out of her hand, and essentially showing off what a freaking badass he is, even as an old man. And while Ace the Bat-Hound is still on top of King, ready to bite his head off, Queen can't. She's trying to shoot at Bruce Wayne's dog, but can't get a clear shot when both Ace, the Royal Flush Gang's robot, and Batman re-enter the fight, with the Batman of the future slamming into Ace hard enough to send him crashing directly into both Paxton Powers and Queen herself. Ace lands in the fountain and short circuits. Queen attacks Batman and tries fighting him, but then he handcuffs her to leave her for the police, while King manages to grab the crown of Tikal and escape on that robotic flying playing card. Bruce asks Terry what took him so long. Terry just points at Ace and says they had an ace in the hole. Bruce pats Ace the Bat Dog's head and says, "Luckily, so did I." While Batman is getting Paxton down, Queen pulls out a metallic razor shaped like a Queen playing card and uses it to slowly saw through the bat cuffs. Cut to the Casino Palace, where King is with Paxton's assistant, and he clearly intends to leave town with her and leave his wife to rot in prison. And the reason that King is cheating on Queen with Paxton's assistant is because at this point he has gotten so sick and tired of her verbally bludgeoning his head in about what a joke the Royal Flush Gang has become, and constantly comparing him to her father, saying that her father should have remained king because he was a better leader, a better fighter, planned better heists, and was superior to him in every single way. But then an energy blast is shot at them by Queen, who just showed up, and she is pissed. King said that he could explain, but Queen isn't really in a listening mood, as she then blames him for ruining their family life, essentially planning to ditch her for Paxton's assistant, and said that she wasted her prime years on him. Paxton's assistant just grabs the goods and runs. She doesn't see King as worth risking her life over. And Batman has her restrained with a double bat bolo before she can even make it to her car. So, during King and Queen's fight, King admits that he wants out because nothing he ever did was good enough for her. And as he tries to leave, Batman punches him in the face. King then blasts his wife with an energy blast because she led Batman to their hideout. And the blast was hard enough to send Queen flying right through the wall, knocking her out. And then we get to the climax of our episode. A fight between Batman and King, where King essentially gives his motivation for betraying his wife and family to Batman, saying, "I couldn't stand it anymore. The constant comparison. Do you have any idea what it's like living in someone else's shadow?" And here's the thing. Batman later in the episode says, "Yeah, I think I can relate." But here's a point where the episode shines. The King playing card was, I'm pretty sure it was intentional that the way the King is posed in this image is meant to remind longtime fans of this very early artwork for Batman the Animated Series. And it shows how King is living in the shadow of his predecessor. Batman Beyond is living in the shadow of this Batman, just as the show Batman Beyond is living in the shadow of Batman the Animated Series. So, in a way, you could take it literally as Batman and King do have something in common, Or you could either look at this as a meta statement as to how the show is always going to be living in the shadow of Batman the Animated Series, which I heard is either coming back or getting a spin-off on HBO Max. But, yeah, then Batman fires out two cutters that slice through the ropes, bringing the massive King playing card down on King, defeating him. So anyways, Melanie does show up to the GCPD to pay Jack's bail and essentially convince her brother to turn his life around, which he agrees to, and it's going to start with him getting a job at the restaurant that Melanie works at. And the episode ends with Paxton Powers getting arrested. And I love the dialogue between him and Commissioner Barbara Gordon, where Paxton says, "I would never do anything like this. Bruce Wayne is like a father to me." And Barbara just looks at him and says, "Yeah, but he doesn't glow in the dark." That was a really witty exchange. And that was the episode King's Ransom. I really gotta say, this is this is an amazing episode of Batman Beyond. And if you can find it on any streaming network or on the 2-disc Batman Beyond Season 3 DVD like I did, you should definitely pick it up. It is definitely worth watching. And with that said, I will now end this review.